Hi guys, my name is Mokolade Fadeyibi, and today on Pages I'll be reviewing this book, it's called Things That Make White People Uncomfortable, and it's written by Michael Bennet. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the background of the book. When you hear things that make white people uncomfortable, I'm sure that will pique your interest and you want to find out exactly what are the things that do make white people uncomfortable. So for me, that was one of the reasons why I decided to buy the book in the first place. Also, I would like to talk about the author, Michael Bennet, and give a little bit of background to the man behind the book. So Michael is an African American. He's in his early 30s. He's an NFL player. He's a football player, and he's a Super Bowl champion. So now let's get right into the book. I would like to talk about 2 or 3 subject matters from the book which caught my attention, which I believe are worth talking about. So the first thing I would like to mention is family life. And so a little bit about that. Michael grew up in Texas in a family of 5 children, 2 boys and I believe 3 girls. And unfortunately at an early age, his parents got divorced. And as a result of that, Michael and his brother had to go live with their father, and the other siblings had to go live with their mother. And as a result of that, you could see all throughout the book that there were references to Michael's younger brother in the book, because they grew up together and they lived together. They actually became footballers together. They played football together, and both of them ended up being Super Bowl champions. But hardly in the book would you see references about his other siblings, about his mother. In actual fact, he talks about his foster mother more than he talks about his actual mother in the book. So for me, it was a lesson about how important it is for families to stay together, for families to remain together, because when there's a split in the family, the impact goes way beyond what we see in the present. It goes way beyond even the father and the mother, and there's a lot of impact on the kids growing up, and even affects the relationship between the children when they are much older. The second point I would like to highlight in the book is what I would call Brotherhood, and a little bit about that. So when Michael got into the NFL, well, there was a hard path for him to get to the NFL, but eventually he made it into the NFL. And when he got in, his aim was just to go in, play, make money, and get out. Basically make money, make enough money to take care of his family, and then get out. He was not into it to make friends with anyone. But when he got into the team, and I believe he played with Seattle Seahawks, he got into the team and he met this group of guys, and before he knew it, this group of guys became like the center of his life. And he formed a bond, he formed a brotherhood with these guys that went beyond anything he ever dreamed of. And again, with a game as intense as the NFL, where you have to be in sync with your teammates, where where you can, any wrong play can lead to a devastating injury, a concussion, or you can even have an injury that ends your career. So a game as intense as the NFL requires you to be in sync with your fellow teammates and to have a close bond with them that goes beyond even the field of play, where you have to know each other's families, you know each other's birthdays, you celebrate events with each other. So that was one thing that he was not prepared for, but ended up being his reality when he joined the NFL. So again, I think that having a network of friends, a network of friends that you can rely on, that can have your back in life, goes beyond, it's really very important. One other point I would like to mention from this book is what I would call out of the box living, and I'll explain it this way. So the average NFL player basically focuses solely on the game and does little else outside of the game. So he plays the game, he gets his endorsements, he gets paid, and doesn't do anything else afterwards. And unfortunately, upon retirement, he doesn't have any motivation or any drive to do anything else after the game is done. And when you combine that with all the injuries he has sustained over the course of his career, all the concussions and all the headbutts and all the basically all the injuries he has had because of his career, that messes up their minds a little bit. And so when you marry the two together, not being able to play the game anymore, you get out of bed, and all you've done for the past 10 years, you can't do it anymore. And also your head is messed up from all the concussion. And So unfortunately, this doesn't bode well for them, and a lot of them end up committing suicide. So Michael is aware of this, and he doesn't want this to be his story. So even while he's playing football, he's involved in a number of other things. So for instance, he's a community organizer, he's a social activist, he has a foundation that works on what he calls food justice. So basically, he tries to educate young children about how to eat properly, how to eat the right way, about good nutrition, and about the dangers of eating fast food that is readily available to everyone. So I would like to tie that into Nigeria and Africa. So a lot of us in Africa, especially let's say also in Nigeria, we tend to stay in one organization for a number of years. We stay in an organization for 20, 30 years, and that defines us completely. And for instance, you would find someone working in government for 20 years or 30 years, and after he retires or after there's a change in government, there's little else to do. And this comes as sometimes it's a shock to them. It's a change in their reality, and it doesn't. Again, they are unprepared for that, and it affects them. It affects how they live. It affects their outlook on life. So it's a lesson for me. It's a lesson for everyone as well to make sure that they're prepared for life outside of what they do currently. So make sure you put in the work now, and you set the stage for what you're going to do outside of what you currently do, and so that you don't get caught unawares, and you don't end up living the kind of life that you didn't plan for. Lastly, I wouldn't be doing justice to the book without talking about things that do make white people uncomfortable. So the last thing I'd like to talk about is what I would call social activism. Yes, I would call it social activism. So Michael is a social activist. He's a community organizer. And I'm sure, I don't know how many of us follow pro sports in the US, and I don't know how many of us know the story of Colin Kaepernick, who I think about 2-3 years ago, he got into national headlines for kneeling during the national anthem, during football games. So that caused a lot of backlash, but again, Michael is a supporter of Colin Kaepernick. And in his own way, Michael doesn't take a knee during games, but he sits on the bench during the playing of the national anthem. And again, he has received a lot of backlash on that as well, but he has not let that deter him in any way. Now, Michael also talks about racism in the US, growing up in the face of racism in Texas, growing up where just a few miles away from people, African American people being dragged at the back of trucks and left to die and being killed. And he also talked about his own personal experience too, because I think a few years ago he flew to Las Vegas to watch an high-profile boxing match. This was between, I believe, Floyd Mayweather and Colin McGregor. And he flew into this, he watched this high-profile boxing match. And again, during the playing of the national anthem, he actually did sit down in the auditorium during the match. So he goes into Vegas, watches this football match, and afterwards he was at the casino just chilling with his friends, and then he hears gunshots. And of course there was a commotion, everybody had to run out, and before he knew it, he got tackled by the police and he was held down with a knee in his back. His hands were cuffed, and he was asking them, what did I do? And they told him, they just silenced him and basically put him at the back of the truck, back of the police car. And he was asking them, what did I do? And he was surprised why he was being arrested. And he thought about it that, wow, this is how it used to be black in America. Even though I'm a famous footballer, I could be shot right now, and they would say, so it was a waking up moment for him. It was reality for him. And eventually he had to tell the cops to basically Google his name, that he was a famous footballer. And it wasn't after they Googled his name and realized who he was that they finally let him go. And he joked that apparently he was not famous enough, because if he was famous enough, he probably wouldn't have been arrested in the first place. So So it was a reality, it was a waking up moment for him to realize that he could easily have lost his life. And he thought about whether he was going to be able to see his wife again, his kids again, whether he was going to be able to kiss his daughters again. And so that reinforced his belief in racial equality, in the Black Lives Matter movement in the US. And again, as a black man myself, I put myself in his shoes, and to realize how it would be so easy to lose one's life over being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And also he talked about the Nword and how the use of the Nword in the US has been a source of controversy. And I'd like to read how he defined the Nword in his book. And he says, I quote, "It's a word of violence. It's a word they say when they raise their torches and rally around statues of slave owners. It's a word that has one aim, to dehumanize us and to turn us into something less than a person, so we are easier to kill, easier to drag behind a truck, easier to dump into a lake, easier to shoot in the back. That's all it is. It's a word that erodes our humanity, a means to an end, and that end is our death." So, in summary, I would say this is a book that it's a very relevant book. It's relevant for our time. It's a book that makes you think about the color of your skin, makes you think about humanity in general. And I would definitely recommend this book to anyone who wants to understand racial equality a bit better. So that's Things That Make White People Uncomfortable, written by Michael Bennet. And that's it for Pages. Thank you.